Fort Henry had already fallen. That was the warning. One Confederate fort on one river was gone. Now, Ulysses S. Grant was moving 12 hard winter miles toward the second one, Fort Donelson, on the Cumberland River. If Donelson fell, the Union would not just have a captured fort. It would have a highway into Tennessee. Nashville would be exposed. The Confederate defensive line across Kentucky and Tennessee would start coming apart. But Fort Donelson did not fall because everything went right for Grant. The roads were bad. The weather was punishing. The Navy's attack failed. The Confederates opened a route out. For a few hours, escape was possible. Then Confederate command did what bad command does. It turned opportunity into paralysis. Grant saw it. He struck. And on February 16, 1862, Simon Buckner asked for terms. Grant's answer was the line that made his name. No terms except unconditional and immediate surrender can be accepted. Early in 1862, the most important roads in the Western theater were not roads at all. They were rivers. The Tennessee and Cumberland rivers cut deep into the Confederate interior. Whoever controlled them could move men, supplies, artillery, and gunboats through country that mud roads could barely serve in winter. Fort Henry guarded the Tennessee River. Fort Donelson guarded the Cumberland. On February 6, 1862, Fort Henry fell. That opened the Tennessee. Grant did not pause long. He turned toward Fort Donelson, the larger work near Dover, Tennessee. The American Battlefield Trust describes the operation as part of an amphibious campaign to push Confederates out of Middle and Western Tennessee and open a path into the Southern heartland. Britannica puts it plainly. Fort Donelson's fall collapsed Southern defenses in the Mid-South and forced the evacuation of Nashville. That is the strategic frame. This was not just a fight over earthworks. It was a fight over movement. If the Confederacy held Donelson, it could still block the Cumberland. If Grant took it, the Union had a river road toward Nashville and a wedge in the Confederate line. Fort Donelson had real strength. Its water batteries looked down on the Cumberland River. Heavy guns could punish ships trying to force their way upstream. On land, the fort had earthworks and rifle pits, and Confederate numbers were large enough to make a quick capture difficult. But strength on paper is not command. Albert Sidney Johnston sent reinforcements and commanders to Donelson. John B. Floyd held senior command. Gideon Pillow and Simon B. Buckner were also there. Nathan Bedford Forrest commanded cavalry. That was a lot of rank inside one threatened position. Grant had his own problems. His army had to move over rough winter roads from Fort Henry. Reinforcements and gunboats did not arrive exactly when he wanted them. His plan depended on pressure from land and water, but the sequence was uneven from the start. By February 13th, most of Grant's men were positioned on the landward western side of the fort. Donelson was being invested. On February 14th, Flag Officer Andrew H. Foote brought his flotilla up the Cumberland. The National Park Service identifies the ironclads St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Louisville, and Carondelet, along with the timberclads Conestoga and Tyler. They came from Fort Henry by way of the Tennessee and Ohio rivers, then moved against Donelson's river batteries. This was supposed to repeat Fort Henry. It did not. For roughly an hour and a half, the gunboats traded fire with the Confederate water batteries. The fort's guns hit hard. Foote was wounded. The flotilla took serious damage and withdrew. The Confederate soldiers cheered. This matters because it removes the lazy version of the story. Fort Donelson was not simply smashed open by Union gunboats. On the river, the Confederates won the day. That left Grant with a land problem, a tightening siege, and a Confederate garrison that still had a chance to escape if it moved quickly. On the morning of February 15th, the Confederates attacked. Their goal was not to destroy Grant's whole army. It was to force open a route of escape toward Nashville before the Union line fully trapped them. The attack hit the Union right. John McClernand's division was driven back. The fighting was hard. The Union line bent under pressure. For the Confederates, this was the moment. The route was opening. Grant had been absent from the immediate front when the attack began, consulting with Foote after the naval failure. When he returned, he found a shaken right flank and reports that the Confederates were trying to break out. But the strange fact of Fort Donelson is this. The Confederate attack worked well enough to create the opportunity, and then Confederate command failed to use it. Gideon Pillow ordered the attacking troops back into their earthworks. The hard-won opening began to close. Grant's best quality at Donelson was not that he avoided trouble. He did not. His army was in trouble. His best quality was that he read what the trouble meant. If the Confederates had attacked heavily from one side, then the opposite side of their line might be weakened. That was the logic. Grant ordered McClernand and Lew Wallace to recover lost ground on the Union right. Then he sent Charles F. Smith against the Confederate works on the Union left. Smith's attack mattered. His division moved against rifle pits and earthworks that were not as strongly held as they needed to be. By dark, Union troops had gained ground that made the Confederate position far worse. The day's story had flipped. In the morning, the Confederates had a road out. By evening, they were back inside the works. Grant was tightening the grip, and Smith had taken positions that threatened the line. That is the real turning point, not the famous surrender quote. The quote is the consequence. The turn happened when the Confederate breakout was abandoned and Grant counterattacked before the opportunity died. That night, February 15th into February 16th, Confederate leaders faced the bill for the day's decisions. They could not easily hold. They had not escaped. Grant was ready to attack again. Floyd did not want to be captured. Pillow did not want to surrender. Buckner was left to face the terms. Forrest refused to surrender his cavalry and led men out through difficult ground and back roads. Floyd and Pillow escaped with part of the force. More than 12,000 men remained. This is where the command failure becomes moral as well as military. The senior commanders who had solved the position left the surrender to Buckner. On the morning of February 16th, Buckner asked Grant for terms. He had reason to hope for something lenient. He and Grant had known each other from earlier Army life. Buckner expected the usual language of negotiated surrender. Grant gave him none. No terms except unconditional and immediate surrender can be accepted. I propose to move immediately upon your works. Buckner called the terms ungenerous and unchivalrous, but he accepted them. Fort Donelson surrendered. The phrase unconditional surrender fit Grant's initials and followed him into national fame. But the line only mattered because the battlefield had made it real. Grant could demand unconditional surrender because Buckner had no useful alternative left. The effect was immediate and large. The National Park Service calls Fort Donelson, with Fort Henry, the North's first great victory. The American Battlefield Trust notes that the victory forced the Confederacy to give up southern Kentucky and much of middle and west Tennessee. Britannica says it forced evacuations at Columbus, Kentucky, and Nashville, Tennessee, and triggered a general Confederate retreat in Kentucky. Nashville became exposed. Then it became a Union supply base. The rivers became federal lines of movement and supply. Grant was promoted to Major General. His name moved from Western obscurity to national attention. There would be hard fights ahead. Shiloh was coming. Vicksburg was far off. Chattanooga was farther still. But Fort Donelson changed the war's geometry. The Union had found a way to make the western rivers work like blades. Fort Donelson is often remembered for one sentence. That is understandable. It is a good sentence, but the battle's harder lesson is operational. A strong position can still fail if the command structure cannot make decisions. A failed attack can still become a victory if the commander reads what the enemy has exposed. A river fort can win against the Navy and still lose the campaign. Grant did not win a perfect battle. He won a damaged one. The gunboats failed. His right flank was hit. The enemy opened a road. Then the enemy gave the road back, and Grant moved before the chance disappeared. That was Fort Donelson. The surrender made Grant famous. The decision after the breakout made the surrender possible. Fort Donelson opened the Cumberland River. It helped force Nashville out of Confederate hands. It made Grant a major general and a national name. Most of all, it showed how the war in the West would be fought, by rivers, railroads, pressure, movement, and command decisions made under ugly conditions. Next, in Civil War daily battles, Pea Ridge, where the struggle for Missouri and the trans-Mississippi West reaches another decisive field.